Hello, everyone. This is yet another episode of Career Talks by Welcome Solutions. In these meetings, we talk with interesting people who have interesting careers and who are willing to share their life hacks with us. And today, I have great pleasure to introduce Aleksandra Lewandowska. She's a PhD candidate at Universiteit Gent and Vrije Universiteit Brussel. Her joint PhD project combined genetics, plant physiology, and biochemistry to understand how plants react to stress. After her PhD contract came to the end, she secured a place at the Blue Book traineeship scheme at the European Commission. While working in the Directorate-General for Research and Innovation, she had a look at the process of science-based policymaking, particularly related to circular economy. She now continues her EU institution journey during her internship at the European Food Safety Authority, where she is a part of the Emerging Risks team. Wonderful to have you here. Thank you so much for being with us, Aleksandra. Thank you so much. And now I would be very happy to hear how your story looks like from your own perspective.
Thank you very much, Natalia. Thanks everyone who are listening to me now. I would like to talk to you about how I ended up being in the EU bubble, which was quite an unexpected turn of events for me. Although now that I look back on it, it seems I should have been thinking about it from the beginning. So I am a biotechnologist, just as Natalia has said. I studied in Poland, first in my home city, Łódź, and then in Krakow. So my background is actually quite practical. I studied at the technical university first, so the aim was to secure a good job after my studies. That was I was convinced by my friends and family that that would be a good way to go, because biotechnology is still considered one of those future-oriented careers. Then I had a very nice run at some traineeships and internships during my university studies, and I thought, okay, basic research seems like a lot of fun. Maybe I should pursue it further. So the logical step for pretty much everyone seems to be a PhD, and I was lucky enough to secure a position at a traineeship PhD traineeship program in Belgium, which basically the primary aim is to combine two fields in one PhD project. That was the whole idea, and each 2 years they accepted 8 PhD students who did this joint PhD. So that really seemed very interesting, and that was a chance to expand my skills further than I would ever have a chance with just one lab. And I really liked the topic of my PhD project, which was quite practical oriented, because I studied how plants react to stress, and stress means drought, high temperature, flooding, or all of those events that are becoming more and more frequent now. So I was really excited, because it seems like this project might really lead to something that everyone can enjoy using in the future, that the agronomists will use it, that the farmers will use it. And you know, you have all those dreams and aspirations, which are great. But then you realize that when you are a scientist, you are really far from the point where you will see those applications. And I had this practical outset from my previous studies, but also from just my personalities. I like to see where things lead to. I like to know that what I do is needed and is useful. And while working in the lab, I had this feeling that while the project is very future-oriented and it might lead to great things, the lab work is actually quite far away from the point when you start to see the results. So I started feeling that I appreciate what I do, and it's a lot of learning, and it's a lot of new skills and opportunities, but I think I should be more involved in the later processes of this science to life stage. And there were some points when I was in the lab, and I was getting really frustrated by the fact that I'm so far away from seeing the results in terms of people actually benefiting from my work. People were saying to me, okay, but you should think about maybe doing a postdoc, because doing a postdoc is a natural way forward, and then you can think about rebranching. But in some aspects, it's a good, it's a fair point. And I know people who do a postdoc in the industry, and that gives them additional set of skills, and then they can use those skills. But when I thought about doing a postdoc, which meant in my case spending more years in the lab, I thought, should I really be doing this? Because in the end, I'm in my 30s. This is the supposed to be the prime time of my life, and you spend more than 8 hours per day at work. And if you don't actually like wet lab, is this the right choice? Is it bringing me further to in my career and in the direction that I want to do? So I was always doing some things on the side, things like science communication, helping organize some events, working with organization of science events like conferences. And that was also hard work, but it never seemed like work to me. It was just something I enjoyed doing. Of course, I was tired at the end of the day because it was a lot of hassle. But this seemed more fulfilling somehow, and I could see that I was doing something that I could immediately see the outcome. I could see people are enjoying what I do or understanding something. So that already gave me some indications that maybe I should try to find a job that would be more oriented towards those things that I actually enjoy doing on a daily basis. So I started looking at those kind of positions. Of course, as many scientists, I was considering maybe I should start doing some science communication, because this is what everyone considers at some point, as Natalia discussed with other guests as well. And I helped out with some events, which was greatly enjoyable, and I liked it a lot. But I considered it more as a networking activity, actually, more than actually the job that I want to pursue doing. And somewhere in the process, I was talking to someone, and they said, "Hey, but maybe you should try for the European Commission, because they have this traineeship scheme, and I know someone who was there and was working in a science department, and they enjoyed it a lot." So I thought, yeah, okay, why not? I was anyway applying for positions. So among other applications, I filled in the one for the commission, and I was accepted. I actually, the commission application, it was just one of my options, and I was not aware how hard it is to get it, but I got it. So it was really a wonderful coincidence somehow that I was chosen, because actually being chosen for the commission is not that hard. It's not that easy also, because a lot of people's CVs seem to look quite the same. And it's just a tiny detail that might attract some recruiter's attention. But when I was there, I started seeing that something that I was not immediately thinking about. So the policy making world was a great fit, because I was still rooted in science. I was working in the Directorate-General for Research and Innovation. So I was surrounded by scientists, but in a completely different context, which was trying to influence regulations and rules that the whole of Europe should be obeying, so that we live in a more healthy or environmentally friendly society. And then when I was there, I already was starting thinking what comes next, because actually staying in the commission for many reasons seemed like a good choice. But also the commission job is something that it might be considered as this kind of position that you will hold till the rest of your job life, let's say. So once I'm there, I was aware that I might actually spend the rest of my career in the commission, which is great, but I was not ready to settle down yet. So I was thinking about another thing. And then I came across this traineeship scheme in the European Food Safety Authority, which is an advisory body for the European Commission. So this is a science-based institution. We generate reports, data analysis, and we help scientists collaborate so that they assess the risks related to food safety. And then the Commission makes decisions based on what we advise. So it is still very much science related. I wouldn't imagine working there if I was not a scientist by training. And I feel like this job where I am now is really a good fit, both for my scientific skills, because as I say, I cannot imagine being there without being a scientist, but also I am more involved in the process of helping scientists collaborate to help translate the findings of basic research into something that is actually more tangible, because we help make rules that keep Europeans safe. We say how much food of certain sort they can eat, or what are the risk of contamination, of infections that are brought about through food. And this is something that touches everyone. And to me personally, this is something that I look for in my job, to have a job that is meaningful, that contributes to something bigger than myself. And I would really hope that I can keep being in a career like this, because to me, from the very beginning, from my PhD choice of my PhD project, being useful or being relevant was one of the main drivers. So now I can feel that this is something that I have successfully achieved to a certain degree. I am, of course, still a trainee and not a full-time scientific officer, but I can see that the expertise that I have and the aims that I have are really well correlated with what the institution is doing, which gives me a sense of being where I actually need to be at this point. So this is something that I wish for everyone, in a way, to be able to find their own piece of work that they will enjoy doing. And I would say not enough people actually consider career in the institutions like this as a choice for a scientist. I think before getting into the EU bubble, I was not aware of how much science the European Commission and the related bodies are actually making. And if I can relay this message to you guys, that you actually can be a scientist and work for the public sector and have a really successful career here, and something that is fulfilling and interesting, then I would be really happy, and if I manage to get this point across.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Ola, for your story. Yeah, you already answered many of the questions I had for you, I have to say. So my first question would be, so you were saying a lot of, you were talking a lot about the fact that in these two institutions, in European Commission and in the European Food Safety Authority, you found your purpose, something that you are willing to work on right now, and it makes you happy. But I would like to also ask you about the working style. So how does your typical week look like? Is there anything like a typical week, or is it very different? And do you think that the way you are working right now, does it align with the way you prefer to work?
Okay, so let me just say first that just after a month of being employed in EFSA, the pandemic started for good in Italy, because EFSA is based in Italy. So after 1 month of coming to the office, then I was stuck in my apartment. So of course you have to take into account that my story might be biased, but it is in essence an office-based job. So that obviously has changed, and now it's my bedroom-based job. But what we do in EFSA is actually quite a lot of negotiations, or facilitating discussions, or having meetings with experts. So I would say it might be a bit better suited to a person that actually likes this kind of interactions. I know a lot of people find networking quite exhausting. So this obviously is a part of this job. So you obviously have to have some people skills to do that, but I think everyone to a certain degree can be successful in this. It also takes a bit of practice. So we have a lot of groups of experts that we work with, because EFSA does not do scientific assessments alone. So we ask experts who collaborate with us to discuss a certain topic, to draft a paper or a review or a technical report, and we help them do this. We coordinate their work. Also, what we do is we participate in a lot of international events. So we have ties to World Health Organization. We have ties to the IPCC, which prepares the climate change reports, or the regional institutions that, for example, now are handling the COVID pandemic, because there is also a food or animal health compartments to it. So we also have meetings on that. There is quite a lot of data analysis. So we also have quite a lot of departments that are involved in data analysis, because now we really are moving more towards using AI or using machine learning to analyze this whole huge amount of data that is being generated. So I would say also, if you are a data scientist, you might consider trying to see what jobs there are, because the data unit is expanding and for sure would be needing a lot of hands on board. There are a lot of projects going on at the same time. In EFSA, just like in everywhere else, I guess we are feeling a bit overwhelmed by the amount of tasks to be done, because we really need to monitor a lot of risks that are coming to Europe. So it may be at some days quite hectic, because there are really a lot of things that have to be urgently done. But I would say that the working life in EFSA is also not, there is no culture of staying at work long hours. There is no rushing through the weekend to have the job done. About the work atmosphere in EFSA, I must say, if I would have to describe it in one word, I would really say collaborative, because we do spend a lot of time doing things together, even though now we are locked in different flats in different countries. But it is a team job in essence. Of course, everyone has different responsibilities, but you are a part of something. You frequently collaborate with your colleagues, but there is if I would compare it to other work environments that I know, I would say it's not competitive at all. Of course, there is a degree of competition, for example, for if there is a job opening, yes, then you obviously have to compete with others. But on a daily basis, you are playing for the team in many ways. You are involved in a lot of things that your colleagues are doing, and they do look out for you when you begin. That is something that everyone has been talking about. Also, new colleagues that have joined my team over this year, me as a trainee, that people really do make sure that you are not left alone, that they explain your tasks. They are always there. And especially during COVID, it was very much appreciated, because I was a part of a group of 70 trainees who came to Italy, and we barely knew each other. And then after 1 month, we were locked in our flats without really an opportunity to even meet and talk to each other. But EFSA has this approach of really providing a lot of information about what's happening. So there is a lot of clarity also when we had the COVID pandemic in Italy in the first full swing, because Italy was had the biggest impact of COVID in March and April. We got newsletters almost every day. We really were informed about the things that are going on, and we were giving also a lot of flexibility on how we conduct our job. Of course, we have core hours, like in every big institutions. There are hours that you have to be present at work, but they are more or less flexible. There is this window that you can adapt to yourself. So you can tweak it a little bit. Some people prefer to work earlier, others prefer to work late, but there is this window that we all have to be there, because if you organize a meeting, everyone has to be there. Nevertheless, it is a job that can be adapted to your needs, because especially if you stay there for longer, there are a lot of possibilities to take childhood care leave. People who have small children were allowed shorter working hours. So it was not a reduction of their salary, but it was actually a reduction of hours, just because their kids are very small and there was no daycare that they could send them to. So it is an employer that in one way is a typical office employer, which has its drawbacks for some people who have very flexible daytime routines. But there is a lot of ways in which you can always talk around some rules. So it is there is a human side to this big corporational aspect, which I actually appreciated, because in difficult times like now, I think that having some sort of structure is helpful, because you have at least a little bit of stability. So you know that you can count on your employer in many ways. And the employer also will take your needs into account. So most of us were able to work from our home countries, and this is really greatly appreciated, because some people got really stuck in another country during 2020, and our job didn't suffer from it, because a lot of it is being done remotely. We switched all of the meetings to remote mode. We have access to all the documents, so there is basically no need to be in the office other than meeting your colleagues, which is just this one aspect that I really miss, because I have really a lot of great things to say about my colleagues, and I just miss them as people. But otherwise, I'm able to do my job from home, and I actually enjoyed it as well, because I am a very social person, but also home office has its obvious advantages, and you can be a little bit more relaxed. You don't have to follow the dress code, and there are all of those benefits that come with home office. And I think EFSA in the future is anyway going to be more flexible with it. So fingers crossed, when the pandemic is more or less over in a year or two, we don't really know. I think some of those things will be there to stay. There doesn't seem to be this push for coming back to what it was before. I think a lot of people appreciate the home office, and they are given opportunity. They will be given opportunities to stay this way, unless there is a need for an in-person meeting. So if you also, for some reason, want to have a job that allows you to stay home a couple of days a week, I think that is something that you can consider. So I have really, my experience in EFSA has been really good in this aspect. And for COVID times, I would say it's a perfect employer, because they were really happy to adapt and help you. But the job itself is varied, even though it's just an office job, because of the topics. The topics really differ, because we have a lot of ongoing things that are brought to our attention. So you learn a lot just because of the topics of your job, and also the techniques that you have to learn, because we are now switching more to the machine learning phase of risk assessment. So obviously there will be lots of things to learn.
Mhm.
And also a lot of communication skills to gain, because we are at the bridge between scientists and citizens. So we also need to explain things to people. And this is something that personally I'm really interested in. And I'm happy that I can learn how to do it effectively here.
Great. Actually, referring to what you just said about working style and how it might change after the pandemic, I've seen a lot of surveys on that topic, and actually, they show that for the vast majority of professionals, the preferred working style is actually partially home office and partially office hours. So the combination of the two. So
Mm,
I think that might be more popular in the future. There will probably be still a lot of companies and institutions that will go fully online. That's also
mm,
why we have a major crisis right now in the rental market, especially office rental.
mm,
And I think this crisis is there to stay. I think that there will be dramatic reduction in the amount of office space that companies and institutions rent. But indeed, I think that after the pandemic, I agree with you that I think employers will also be more liberal about your home, like working from
mm,
home during the week, which is I think good in the end. I can also say that I was actually used to working from home before the pandemic
mm,
started, but now when I don't really have to take a train. So before the pandemic, I had to take a train every single time I was going to a business meeting because I live away from Amsterdam. Everything that happens in the Netherlands, like business-wise, happens in the Randstad area. So there are
mm,
four major cities, and like almost 100% of all business is actually happening there. So every single time I had to just walk to the train station, jump on the train, and then run back with for the last train in the night, and I was always, it was hectic, and
mm,
now this year is very peaceful, and I can also see that in many ways I became more productive because I have very stable like working style, and I can decide when, okay, I'm done for today, I'm tired, and that's it. And I think many people also discovered that after all, after you get used to it, working from home can be more productive, but also healthier for you. So I
Yes, for
think,
sure.
yeah.
It brings down a lot of barriers also, because I work in my job. I talk to a lot of experts from different countries, and before COVID, they normally came to EFSA twice a year, for example, for a big meeting, and they enjoyed it, and they say they miss it because there was this networking component, and they went out for lunch or they went out for dinner, and of course this is something that they miss. But otherwise, it's much easier now to participate in a high level meeting that is happening on the other side of the globe. And I'm really glad to see that happening. Of course, we all have Zoom fatigue, and we cannot really stand to listen to a lot of webinars these days because we jumped at the opportunity and everyone was trying to listen to everything. And after a while, we gave up. But in general, I'm happy that I can tune in and just listen to top level officials discussing some subject, which before was done behind closed doors, and you had to go and you had to set up this whole travel allowance and endless paperwork. Now you can actually talk to a really high level professor who is sitting at their home on a couch, which is great. And I feel like a lot of things have become less formal in this environment of the EU bubble also, because people really, you can see them sitting at home, and it is a bit ridiculous sometimes when you think that this is a really important person, but you see their living room. But that did bring us a bit closer together in many ways. And I was quite surprised about my experience in those EU institutions, that actually people are quite ready to help or quite ready to collaborate informally in a lot of ways. This was something that I was not fully expecting. I think that people really do look for ways to do stuff together. Um, I was talking to some officials in Canada, and now they are doing some things that are really similar to the things we were doing here in EFSA. And um, I was not expecting, I think, that a lot of things are really being discussed quite informally, and a lot of important developments happen just because people decide to team up together without any big official frameworks. Of course, there is this aspect of big official frameworks as well, especially on the commission level, that a lot of things are passing through hundreds of hands and have to get a lot of signatures. But I think it's a really interesting experience just to see how things are really done and how those big decisions are made, because now we are all going to be affected by the European Green Deal. Whatever you might think of it, there are aspects of it that seem really well developed and others that are controversial, but it is really nice to observe how it is actually being developed. And being involved in this, it's not really policy making, but we are really close to the policy making, and I think it makes you a bit less disconnected from what's happening at the EU level, because especially in my country, in Poland, people seem to be thinking that the EU is some kind of outside player that is trying to meddle with people's lives, but they don't really understand how it is, what it is doing, and how it is working. And being involved in it, you can really see that you as a European citizen, you have a voice and you are a part of this process and you are affected in many ways. I think it has made me more enthusiastic would not be a good word, but it has made me appreciate the EU a lot more than before, because we all have this idea of this Brussels as a city where a lot of people seem to be doing no one knows what, and just ruffling through a lot of papers. But in reality, this is crucial work, and it is very interesting. Some of it is might be frustrating just because of the sheer amount of time it takes to get things done. But you have to remember that the EU was originally, its organizational structure has been pretty much the same since there were only a few countries, and now we have 27. So everything has expanded in size, and there are some obvious organizational drawbacks, but overall people really seem to be driven to make a difference. And it's a nice environment for people who want to be part of the change. They are not satisfied only with reading things in the newspaper and not being involved, but now you can actually see the people behind those newspaper topics, and you can actually do something that also will be mentioned at some point and will touch people. So that's something I really looked for, but I was not sure how to get there, I think, for a lot of years. And now I can see that I'm there. I'm actually maybe not the person that actually makes any important decisions, but I am involved in this process. So yeah, I think it restores your faith in the humanity a little bit to be working in the institution that is actually purely citizen driven. It is not a profit-based institution, so you are not working toward the financial goal, which in itself is of course great. There is nothing bad about it, but it has a different purpose. So if you are a person who wants to work in the public sector, I think there are a lot of institutions that could be a good employer for you.
Actually, referring to what you said about the public reception of European institutions. I think that partially journalists are responsible for this, because the way they picture European institutions, they always, the stories in press. So what kind of stories make it to the press? Like stories like, oh yeah, European Commission or European Union measures a curvature of a banana and things like that, right? So every single time there is some very weird type of regulation, then they of course bring it to light and just put a lot of attention on it. So I think that's one of the reasons why many people, including me myself, like when I hear European Union, I'm like, yeah, those eggheads, right? And so I think this is just a wrong impression that we get from press mostly. And indeed, as you said, there is little awareness of how these institutions really work. And actually, this is also what I would like to cover next, because I let myself look into Glassdoor and to read what states there. I was very curious what people say about working for EFSA and for European Commission. Because I also wanted to hear the dirty stuff, right? The dirty stories, and I found out that European Food Safety Authority is actually rated very well. It received 92% of votes in terms of whether or not you would recommend it to a friend. So I think it's very good. It's definitely much better than CD Projekt Red, if you know what I mean. We are both Polish, so
Well,
you probably
yeah,
read
yes,
the news, right? There's
it's all over the news now. Yeah.
yeah, and it's actually quite a big bummer. Like a famous Polish a video game producer, CD Projekt Red, just released their long-awaited, like 8 years awaited game, Cyberpunk 77 last week, and then it was a major flop because of the quality of on consoles, and then actually people started digging into the quality of management in that company, and turned out that they have great developers, but the management is completely dysfunctional. And also it's reflected on Glassdoor as well, so you can read how managers treat their employees in CD Projekt Red. But anyways, yeah, so the ratings are very good, but let me just read a few comments that I found that are not as positive. So I would like to ask you about your opinion here. So one comment that I found that was actually coming up relatively often was bureaucracy. Second, not too much to learn, too many meetings, strict strict. My writing is not very precise. But one thing that was also coming up very often was that it's hard to get a job after internship. And this was also the same that people were saying about European Commission and many other public institutions. So what is your perception on this? Because actually, this, in my view, like the way that traineeships are treated in a private sector, so in companies, a traineeship is some stage of recruitment. So when you are accepted as a trainee, normally traineeship requires some learning process and requires engagements from other employees to actually get you, accommodated to the company. So this is not done unless the trainee is a potential employee, because it's a cost to the company. So once you get accepted for a traineeship in a company, by default, it means that you will be an employee if everything goes well. That's typically how it looks like. But from what I read from Glassdoor, it seems that public institutions treat traineeships very different. So I would like to hear your opinion about this and how it really looks, and what are your chances of getting a job after a traineeship?
Okay. Coming to the traineeship, so I can talk about the two that I was participating in. So I have the Blue Book experience, and then I have the now this EFSA experience. They are quite different. So one thing though that I have to say is that it's quite important that both of them are paid, and paid in a way that it's a livable wage, I would say, which is not a standard. And if you compare it to the United Nations, it's a huge difference. In the UN, you don't get paid for a traineeship, which biases the pool of applicants, because only people who can afford it will go for it. the Blue Book is a huge traineeship program. Now I think they expanded it to maybe, I wouldn't like to lie, but it's surely over 1,000 trainees that are entering there every 6 months. So obviously not all of them will find a job in the European institutions, and that's to be expected. And no one is giving you a promise of being accepted to the commission afterwards. It's absolutely not how it works. But when you meet people working in all the institutions surrounding the commission and the parliament, the young professionals, when you talk to them, it will turn out that most of them have been the trainees. So this is a first step into European policy making in many ways. So the traineeship is not giving you a promise that you will be employed after that, but for sure, if you add it to your CV, it opens very many doors. And it is treated as some kind of training in European policy making. So if you have been a trainee, people will assume that you know how it works, how this whole EU machine works. It also really depends hugely on who you are working with, because every traineeship is different. There are 1,000 people starting each semester, and all of them will have a different experience. There are very, very different. I was in DG in RTD, so research innovation, and most of my colleague trainees were also scientists or had some science background. So we were given relatively similar tasks, but if someone was working in the law department, they were doing something completely different. So also their supervisor is the person who is responsible for allocating tasks to you. I was given a more or less independent project when I was a trainee. So my supervisor basically trusted me to do some analysis myself. And of course, he was always available there to help me. But he also told me that I can, in many ways, do what I want, which meant that if there was an event that I was interested in, I could go. I just had to tell him, today there is this conference that I want to go to. And this is something that always should be done on such traineeships. Just being accepted as a trainee, it might be similar to your Erasmus experience, and that's fine. If you are there to do the bare minimum and then party a lot, also this is something that people do in Brussels. You can see crowds of people. I mean, not now because COVID, but a year ago, just Brussels was crowded with the trainees and the young professionals just being there to enjoy it and have a good time. And that's fine. Some people treat it as a kind of extended 5-month Erasmus part 2. But if you want to stay, you can actually see people who are there to stay from day one. They have a different outset already, and you can see them like frantically networking with everyone and asking around what there is to do. And you probably would have to have a different approach. If you are there to stay, there are courses and study groups for the exams, the EPSO exams that you have to take to be a EU official. So people who are there to be a commission employee, they actually think about it from day one of their traineeship. So not everyone will get it, that's correct. You have to take it into account, but this is something that people do for their, I would say, personal development, to gain some new skills, because a lot of Brussels jobs require some experience in policy making, and the traineeship is this experience basically. So this is how it looks like. And then in EFSA, the traineeship lasts longer. So it's 1 year, which means now I'm reaching the end of my year of traineeship, more or less. After a year, you really are in many ways treated like an independent employee of EFSA. From the very beginning, people will give you quite a lot of tasks that are not operating the photocopier, but are actual tasks that are important and have relevance. So they do trust you with a lot of stuff. I have not heard of a trainee who has been treated as a baby who needs to be guided by their hand. This is absolutely not the approach. EFSA is a very nice working environment, and people are there to help you, but just as in the commission, maybe to a lower degree, there is they count on you to be proactive. It's always the case that you are given a lot of things to do, but you are also given a lot of choices. And if you are there talking to people and they are doing something that interests you, there is no problem in participating in it and trying to make yourself known, because it is all also about getting to know people and being involved in the projects. And definitely there is a chance to stay after the traineeship. There are the most obvious in between position is being an interim. So this is slightly better paid than being a trainee, but then still you are in this transitional period between being a trainee and being an employee. But there are also open calls that you can apply for. And EFSA now is expanding in size, number of people. It will have quite a significant raise in the number of people. So there are opportunities, but again, the idea of the traineeship is not to give you a surefire position just after that. If you wish, there are opportunities to stay, but also after the EFSA traineeship, for sure, it would be much easier to find a position in your home country in a similar authority, because EFSA collaborates with institutions in every member state. So if you have been in EFSA, you will have it much easier to find a job in a regional authority. Also, quite a lot of people do the traineeship in EFSA between their masters and PhD. And also we have quite a lot of PhDs. So I treat both traineeships actually as some necessary stages if you want to branch out. If you don't want to stay in academia, you have to remember that for a lot of employers, your academic experience will not be exactly relevant. So if you want to do a regulatory job or a policy making job, doing these traineeships might be essential just to introduce you into another field. I consider it as my chance to gain necessary skills to have a career in another field, because I cannot really imagine how else you would be able to enter this kind of positions. It is relatively hard to get employed in the commission, for example, without having any links to it before. And the traineeship is quite a broad program, so that is one of the ways. And the traineeship itself also is an opportunity just to get to explore and the job market in general, because both the Commission and EFSA have a lot of stakeholders that they collaborate with. So through those traineeships, you can also try to make yourself known to some other institutions, and this really expands your possibilities. But just you get to know about a lot of employers that you did not know before, because it might not be immediately apparent to everyone after a PhD that there are as many consultancies or lobbying organizations or NGOs or all those other actors that are active in Europe or in the world in general. We don't hear about them as much in academia, I guess, but these are all potential employers that are really interesting, and their profile really might fit you in many ways. But a traineeship is just something that allows you to get to know them, sometimes informally during those networking events or informal conversations. You just know what's in there, because not every university will give you a good career guidance course, or any guidance course actually. So if you are considering changing your career, and that's what a lot of Natalia's listeners are considering, I'm assuming, this traineeship is really something to consider, because you also will have a chance to confront your preconceived notions about public sector with the reality. I did not think about it much before I joined. Of course, I was aware of them, but I did not really know what they do or how they operate, how they work. And though the traineeships give you enough opportunities to actually understand it, and then you can actually make an informed decision if you want to stay or not. About the bureaucracy, because it was also something that you mentioned on the Glassdoor. Yes, of course. I mean, I would lie if I said that there is no bureaucracy. Of course there is, especially in the Commission, when it has to pass through an institution which employs 30,000 people. But I think I understood the bureaucracy a little bit more now that I'm in EFSA, because bureaucracy, one of the reasons why some bureaucracy is there, it's present and you cannot really skip it, is because it gives you a level of transparency, because we have this responsibility for the citizens, that if they wish to, they can follow what we do in detail. So as painful as it might be sometimes to take minutes of every meeting, it is then important that the citizens, if they are interested, they can have a look at what we actually do. And we are working on very sensitive topics: GMOs, vaccines, I don't know, pesticides. So some people really are interested, and we have this obligation to be clear about what we do. So this generates quite a lot of work, which is maybe not immediately appealing, but I don't know, now maybe with automatic transcripts from the meeting, we have those voice recognition techniques, maybe this bureaucracy will be done by someone else rather than a system. That's fine. Some of the bureaucracy, I think, might be avoided, yes. But in any case, I don't have an. I wouldn't try to say that that it doesn't exist. It is there. Some of it is there for a reason. Some of it is an artifact of the older times when the commission started originally working, or EFSA, and people haven't really gotten around those things yet. Maybe someone will be brave enough to do a huge institutional reform one day, and it will become leaner and smarter. I hope so. But for now, there are certain ways which we have to accept until someone makes a huge reform out of it. And so I hope I addressed it. So it was the bureaucracy, the limited possibilities after the traineeship. And yeah, if you have any other glass door comments, just bring them along and we'll see.
Well, actually, it's mostly that in terms of things that people are complaining about. Actually, one thing that they often say as a good aspect is that there are lots of intelligent people to work with, which was quite surprising, I have to say. I'm apparently also a victim to this, you know, stories by journalists and who always picture politicians as not too smart people. But that again kind of shows what's the difference between reality and what we hear on the media.
I would maybe give a brief comment here, because we as Commission or EFSA employees, we are not politicians per se. You probably have an understanding of the European institutions as the politicians who are actually mostly in the European Parliament. The European Parliament is a great idea per se, but you probably have this experience from your member states as well, where the European Parliament members are sometimes the politicians who for some reason are not willing or are not allowed to stay in national politics, and they are somehow pushed away to Brussels because we don't really want to have them active in the regional politics. So a lot of European Parliament members are there somehow, I would say not for the right reasons, that's the way to put it, but most of them are really doing great jobs. But again, in the Commission and in the European agencies, these are mostly the scientists, the officers, the lawyers. They are not really politicians. So there is this whole body of experts, and expertise is really badly needed there. And then the politicians are only the top level officials, actually. So of course, these are the ones that are visible, and we have those horror stories of MEPs doing really horrible things sometimes, or really ridiculous things. But these are just a small percentage of people who are doing the work that you don't normally really talk about or see, the people who are working in this huge machine and pushing it forward. I think my favorite unsung heroes of the Commission are the translators, who are doing an extremely tough job, because on the high level meetings, you have to have translators for every European language, and they are working, they are simultaneous translators. So these are extremely hard jobs, and in the commission and in other institutions, you meet people who really, not even the translators, but they speak several languages. They all have international experience. These are really people who have seen a lot of the world, who have a lot of experience. So for sure, this is not this is an environment where you can learn a lot. In the commission, I was working in a team that was composed of medical doctors, of professors of chemistry, of really people with different levels of expertise. Some of them actually work in the commission, but also work at some university. So there is this overlap, and it is for sure this is for sure wrong to assume that you cannot meet that this is not an intellectually challenging environment of some sorts. This is absolutely not correct. And the lack of opportunities to learn, I would say maybe it might be a little bit unit or department specific, because if you work in the department of that is related to science, innovation, and research, you actually have to be continuously updated with what's happening in the science world, because you have to stay on top of the developments. So you might not be doing the actual science, but you have to stay on track, and you have to at least be on track enough to understand what the scientists are doing, because if you are going to make decisions based on it, you have to understand it. So that depends on what you consider learning opportunities. Yes, you won't be learning new lab techniques yourselves, but you have to understand them still, because if you get the results coming from those experiments, you have to be able to critically assess them. So it's a different type of learning, I would say. Yes, you might not get hands-on experience. That's obvious, because you are not in the lab anymore. You are not doing the science, but the science doesn't stop there. The science is also what you make of those results, or how do you critically analyze them. People develop all those techniques for data, for combining the data, for visualizing the data. This is all that's developing still, and you will be learning that as well. Not to mention communication skills. I think as scientists, we have this preconceived notions that as scientists, we will be good at talking science, which is absolutely not correct. This is also something that you have to learn, and this is actually a continuous learning curve. I don't think that you ever stop learning how to communicate science to people. You have to do it all over again to every audience. You have to react to new risks and new pseudoscience stories. Now we have the stories of microchips in vaccines, which came out of nowhere, and you always have to learn and tackle the crises. And in my job, I'm sure in EFSA or an authority like this, which reacts to crises basically on a daily basis, every day is something new. So there is no limit to learning in a way, because you have to adapt to all those new circumstances.
Right. And actually, I have to say that sometimes just looking at the way scientific projects are done from the sidelines is actually better, because you rested and you're not in this bubble anymore. And I have to say, I still review papers in neuroimaging, even though I don't write new manuscripts at the moment. And I can see that when I'm rested and I'm out of it, then I see many more mistakes, like little things or conceptual problems, and that I used to see in my own papers when I was doing it. So it's also good to have like a independent person in the project that is just like looking over the whole pipeline without being involved in every single step, just to have that fresh look at the whole project. So probably that also improves the projects for sure. And I have one question, just one more question I have about your working style. I'm very curious, since you mentioned that some of the initiatives you're doing are like bottom up, so you initiate them by yourself. And then who is actually evaluating your progress, your results? Like, do you have some formal boss who is basically grading you, or how does it look like?
As a trainee, yes, I have a formal boss, let's say. I have a traineeship supervisor who is responsible for that. So at the beginning of my traineeship, we have listed the projects that I will be working in, and that will be evaluated if I was successful in reaching those goals. Um, And in institutions like this, normally there is a sort of, mostly it's a yearly plan of work that you develop, and you try to allocate provisionally the time that you would be spending on it, because there are certain things that the institutions has to do every year. So the progress is being monitored, and it's quite strict about it, that you once a year have a look at what you've done, and you try to see where it has gone, and if you actually delivered. However, the project that I was working on for this past year, which was related to climate change, it actually started as my traineeship supervisor talking about it over coffee with someone, just informally. Most projects in EFSA originate because the commission or a member state asks us to do something. But this is an example of a project that just appeared in my supervisor's idea someday, and he recruited his colleagues from other units, and he said it might be interesting to follow it up. So there is this flexibility in what EFSA does. So it's not only passively reacting to what's happening, but also because most of the employees are scientists by training, they follow what's happening. So they also have ideas popping up. And this project was quite unusual because it was this bottom-up approach, and it also did not have a strict goal set, and there is this level of independence, you might say. But once you convince people to do a project, of course you have to put it in a way of a formal project, let's say, with all the rules of project management. You have to have a goal in mind, you have to develop some steps. So this is something that that is quite useful, because it also allows you to monitor your progress. But I wouldn't say that those ways to monitor progress are very strict or very rigid, and I didn't find myself spending too much time on evaluating the KPIs, or being stuck on evaluating the project rather than doing the project. There is a certain level of project management that has to be done. And of course, I have my traineeship supervisor, and I have my team leader, and I have all the people upper in the management who are looking over this. But on a daily basis, I think people trust you to do your job, and they leave you to it in a way that they trust that you are the one responsible enough for allocating time for it, and for being on top of this. So I think being treated like a grown-up and as a trainee is a real advantage, because a lot of people have this traineeship experience in different companies, for example, that they are really not allowed near anything important, or they are really guided by the hand, and their time is really separated into tiny chunks, and they are being watched over their shoulder. I didn't have this experience. I think people really do trust you, that you are responsible enough to do this. But just because of being a public institutions, we have to deliver those yearly reports of our work, because people pay us money, so they want to know what happens to this money. So this is this part of bureaucracy that comes strictly from being paid by the citizens. We have to somehow prove that we were doing something, and not just I don't know, being paid for nothing.
Right. And actually, about bureaucracy, originally bureaucracy was um, first proposed in the end of 19th century or beginnings of 20th century, and it was actually, the purpose was good. It was to prevent nepotism, prevent all these inequalities in the job market that were present in Middle Ages, when the way you were born actually determined your whole life. So the purpose of bureaucracy and bureaucratic procedures was to give equal chances to everyone, to actually start evaluating work on the basis of results, and not just assign people with positions based on their like lineage. So like the motives are very positive, the motives are good, It's just that too much bureaucracy kills you, right? So that's, I think, why most people, yeah, they don't, they are not fans, because sometimes it just goes too far. But
Of
after all,
course.
bureaucracy is what keeps us apart from nepotism and Middle Ages. So in fact, it's a good thing.
Yeah.
Okay, and my question for you would be, now you mentioned that you're coming to the end of your internship. So what is
Mhm.
your plan? So is it that, are you planning to apply for a job in your current position, or are you still looking
Mhm.
for new adventures? Like, what is your next step?
So in theory, my traineeship would be ending now. But what was great about EFSA is that they offered all of us half year of extension. Because of COVID, we argued as trainees that our learning opportunities were diminished because we would have met more people, networked more if we had the chance. And EFSA was really gracious in this aspect that they granted us 6 more months. We were expecting no more than 2 more months, so we really were pleasantly surprised. So for now, I'm staying here, and I have been exploring possibilities to stay in EFSA. So at this point, a lot of things are really preliminary, so I don't want to jinx anything, but there are ways to, as I said, there are ways to stay. So as trainees, we are not treated, I would say this, we are not treated as more likely to get a position in EFSA, in a way that the process is not rigged so that in our favor. But we of course have this 1 year of job experience that counts in our favor. So this is, all the process is very transparent. So we apply for the same openings that appear just on EFSA's website. I would like to stay just for the reasons that I mentioned, that it just fits my profile as a scientist, but also it fits the way I would like to work. So I have, I would like to stay if possible. Also, this is I think EFSA is a job that fits in my idea of work-life balance, in a way that this is a job that that I have a lot of responsibilities and I'm doing something important. But it allows you to have this division between work and life that I really enjoy having. That my weekend is for me and myself only, and when I'm at work, I'm devoted to my job, and I like spending time at work or working. But at the same time, um, it fits with what I imagine the work-life balance to be. So when I'm at work, I'm working. When I'm off work, then I can enjoy being out and about. Also, EFSA is in a really, really beautiful place. It's a really beautiful region of the world. So it cannot be overstated enough that Parma is beautiful, and it has a lot of places around there that are beautiful. So just for this, it would be amazing to stay and continue living there. So we will see. For now, I cannot really say anything specific, but for sure, those two traineeships have biased me more now towards the public sector jobs, which in the European institutions are quite well paid. So you can live a comfortable life without worrying too much, which might not be the case in a lot of countries, unfortunately. I would have doubts about working in the public sector in my country because of the salary and the working conditions solely based on that. It is quite a sad reality that public sector jobs in many ways are in many countries are underpaid, and I don't think it should be like this, because also it doesn't then attract the best talent to those positions. I'm sure that you would agree with me that in Poland we have this problem that the public sector is full of people who are there because it was their only it was the only thing that they were able to do at some point. So I believe,
I started
yeah,
laughing already when you said that in Poland we have a problem, and I started nodding already, because we have all
yeah,
types of problems
yeah,
possible.
yeah. Yeah, now
I
we
agree.
definitely, well, there are, yeah, it's interesting, I would say, to say the least. But in my family there are quite a lot of people who work in the public sector, so I know that there are certain problems just related to being severely underpaid. There are so many things that you are not able to do because of lack of budget, simply. Um, then that makes me quite sad, because I would really like working in the public sector in general, but the European institutions have this huge advantage of appreciating your work also in the financial aspect of it, so that they know that you have to have good qualifications to get a job there, so it only makes sense that you are also decently paid. I really appreciate it, and I think it should be treated the same in many public sector institutions, because yeah, I mean, it seems a bit of a ridiculous reality sometimes when you think that people who work in the public sector are there not because of their choice, but because they run out of other options, and then that seems to be the case in a lot of countries. But yeah, that kind of makes me think that a public sector job in a lot of countries might be completely different from what I just described, and it's really unfortunate that it's like this. I really do hope that it will change, and maybe one day the national authorities will offer job opportunities that are as good as what I have described. I really do hope so.
Yeah, it's actually really dependent on the country, and this disproportions between different sectors very much dependent on the region. For instance,
Yeah.
in Portugal, as like compares to Poland or Netherlands, the salaries in industry are actually lower than postdoc salaries most of the time. So when I talk to people working there, they actually just look at me very surprised when I tell them, I know that you would like to earn more outside outside academia, but you have to give it, give it a thought, because you have to take into account that you should also choose the right job. And they're like, wait, but we are well paid now. Like when we step out of academia, it's the other way around. We have to compromise on our salary. So it's like exactly the opposite. So it's really really dependent on the country. I agree. In I think in the Netherlands, indeed, there are lots of public institutions. I think it's not as competitive to get there, especially as a PhD. I think PhDs they are respected, so they already have some points at the start. This is one of the areas where PhD is like respected as a competence at the job interview, as opposed to corporations, for instance, who don't care. They just want someone to fit the profile. They don't care about your titles. But in public institutions, your title gives you some advantage.
Yeah.
But one problem I hear from people who work for public institutions, especially for RVO and Chamber of Commerce and all these big, massive institutions that have 1,000 and more people, that they are more actually concerned about the fact that there is a lot of inertia, and that they talk a lot about innovation, but they don't really do any innovation. So it's like, if you like talking about it, then yes, you can go there. But if you really want to have any hands-on impact on innovation, then you have to go somewhere else, because it will just end up with talking and writing reports. And this is, I think, in the Netherlands there is a big disconnection between what public institutions are doing and where the innovation is really happening. So many people with this scientific mind are just disappointed from the experience. But again, this really depends on the institution and where you end up. So that's also something I always have to tell people. Like, every institution, every company has a different culture, and it's like, it's hard to give. It's not algorithmic. Like, you can't really come up with a formula that will tell you 100% that you will be happy in that particular place, because yeah, every place and even every unit is different, right? Probably if you had a different supervisor for your project, your experience might be very different, right? In the same exact place.
Yeah.
So it's never, it's never 100% certainty. Okay, so we have to come up to the end of this episode slowly. But actually, one thing I still would like to ask you would be: is there anything that you can come up with when you think about your professional life up to this point and your career so far? Is there anything that, if you had a chance, you would do differently, given that you ended up doing like working in a very, very different environment from where you started? Like, is there anything that you think you might have done more efficiently or differently?
Mm, I think during my PhD, there were, like in every PhD project, I think there you could point out a lot of moments when you would have made different decisions in your, I don't know, experimental planning or things like this. Um, I would say I don't have any major regrets, like I regret making this choice or going to this university or anything like that. Maybe I would have been less hesitant to do things outside of my PhD project at the beginning. I think at the end of my PhD, I was more I discovered that I really like those side activities a lot, and I was not, let's say, hesitating to join them. Of course, as a PhD student, you always your main responsibility is your research project, but also at the same time, especially if you feel like you might not be staying in academia or you have different things in mind as well, then whatever you like doing, you just keep doing it. It's never a bad idea. I know of my colleagues who are doing the PhD with me, that they were doing indeed a lot of science outreach, science communication, but just for first of all, just because that's something that they did and they felt it was important, but also they were just in touch with a lot of organizations that are outside of the university. And when I follow up on what they are doing, I think these are the students that they have the most interesting jobs now, because they just were trying not to focus only on their PhD as they were doing it. It also helps your mental health, it helps your social life if you just live your life alongside your PhD. But I'm not a believer on just doing things that might help your CV. I think that it's equally as important to have hobbies, whatever they are, and keep following them. And maybe that was I maybe would have started some extracurricular activities earlier during my PhD if I was to choose something that I would maybe have started sooner, because it's just an outlet for you as a person. You are not your PhD. Your PhD is just a part of your life, and in several years' time, you will actually not remember the experiments that you did, but you might want to come back to this period of your life and remember something else as well. So, yeah, I might have thought about this work-life balance a little bit differently in some aspects. Um, but no, I don't think I have any regrets like this. Even though I don't plan to be a scientist working in the lab, I just doing the PhD and working in the lab for 4 years these are the things that brought me where I am. So this was a part of the process. This was actually, PhD is still part of your education. Actually, I mean, it's good that it counts as experience, but it's actually, I consider it more education than anything else. So that's how I would say it.
Okay, okay, great. And my last question then would be, do you have any general advice that you would like to share with PhD students who are now thinking of their future?
Mhm. I would say really think about that is my personal view, of course, only that you really think about what fits your personality and your working style, because this is something that we sometimes end up endlessly being tired of just working in an environment that is good for many people but not for you specifically. And sometimes it's just good to stop and think what aspects of your current job as a PhD student or wherever you work, what aspect of this job you actually like and what comes naturally to you, and what is the aspect of your job that you certainly are not good at, even no matter how hard you try. And try to be a bit more aware of this, because I guess when you discover your weak and the good sides, then it's much easier to steer your career in a way that would be much less frustrating and more fulfilling in the end. Because in academia, you might be surrounded by people with very different outsets and skills, but we are measured by the same, well, we are measured by the number of publications or by how good we are at doing a certain thing. But uh, this is, I mean, we are really judged by a very harsh and not very flexible standards there. And it's quite easy to think that because you don't certainly fit those boxes, then there is something wrong. You just might be fit for something else. So the sooner you discover this, your talents, or however you might call it, I think the easier it gets. And you then have a little bit of peace of mind that because you might not be having as many papers as somewhere else, but because this is because you might want to go in another direction after a PhD.
Yeah, actually, I couldn't agree more. And my whole book, which I can show here, my whole book is actually exactly about that. So about how to fit your profession and your job and your position to your personality and to your values as well, and the way you perceive your job. Because also for everyone, job plays a different role in their life. So it's also a very important aspect, and some of us are more associated with our jobs and some of us are more distant naturally, so it's very important to take into account, and I couldn't agree more. Great, fantastic. So thank you so much, Ola, for all your priceless advice. I learned a lot. I'm sure that people who watch this episode as well, and you guys who came to the end of this episode, thank you so much for watching. It was great,
Thank you.
great having this conversation. And if you would like to get more of this type of material, then please subscribe to this channel. And in any ways, all the best for Christmas time, and hopefully see you soon.
Thank you very much. Bye.